Broadcasting live on the UnitedWest.org AM radio network and simulcasting on DirecTV, iHeartRadio, Roku, and the World Wide Web, this is Enemies of the State with Tom Trento.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to our humble abode here at the United West Television Studios in South Florida on the 1st of June, 2015. Only 6 months of hurricane season left. That's all we have. 6 months of having to worry about a hurricane every day. But you know what? It's a little bit to sacrifice for living and working in paradise. Damon, I'm sending you a very interesting story about Jennifer Lopez being slammed by Muslims in Morocco, the moderate Muslim country of Morocco. And at 6 minutes after, Tom Trento, your host, name of the show right there behind me, Enemies of the State. We specialize in identifying enemies of the United States, of the Western civilizational states, of the State of Israel. All the bad guys, some of them are external to Western civilization, i.e. Islamic Jihad, the Ummah, greatest threat to civilization today, Islam. And also we have internal threats that we deal with, one of whom lives at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. As we screamed at the top of our lungs all of 2007 and 2008, and we've been screaming every day since then, this president will implement policies and procedures in this country that will radically, by his own words, transform it. Remember, hope and change. Well, you got your change and things look hopeless more than they ever did. And the administration has failed virtually at every institutional component in society. They've certainly failed in foreign policy.
Or they have succeeded.
Well, yeah, if you are looking from where we sit, they failed. If you're looking from the strategy room, the strategery room at the White House, they've succeeded greatly in calibrating down the colonial threat that the United States posed to the free world and the unfree world and third world countries. We said early on, folks, on WSBR Radio, Tom Trento, your host here, 740 on the dial. I'm going to tell you about last night in a minute. Remind me, Damon, because we got so much. This is a two-part show today. We have 2 hours of material that we're going to talk about, we're going to analyze, we're going to give you our opinion on, that occurred over the weekend. Busy weekend. And we maintain that if you watch the regular mainstream media shows, even Fox, which is very mainstream, you'll get analysis, their particular spin, and you'll get some opinion. They bring in talking heads. But you're not going to get the clear-cut, unadulterated, non-politically correct statements like, we will indict Islam as a system, not qualify it with radical Islam or Sharia Islam. We do use those terms tactically and technically, but the problem is Islam as a comprehensive system. You won't hear that on other news shows or talk shows or opinion shows. Because that's not our job. We're not a news agency. We're not a talk agency. We're not an opinion agency. We're a counterterrorism investigative organization that's fighting to maintain the Judeo-Christian principles of Western civilization. Why? Pretty simple. We think they're better than the alternative. And we've seen in our lifetime, we've seen, let me put it, if you were born, from the 40s on, the baby boomers, what is that, 46 to 64, baby boomers. Right at the tail end of World War II, we saw fascism in Italy. We saw the Nazi viewpoint in Germany, communism in the Soviet Union, in Russia. We saw these three alternatives to Western civilization, and at pointed elements or pointed places within these various political doctrines, they fail. They fail when they misinterpret human nature, when they misinterpret economics, when they misinterpret foreign policy, when they misinterpret business. Communism on a sheet of paper may sound wonderful, from each according to their means, to each according to their need, that sort of thing. Sounds wonderful. In the real world, when you put people implementing that or trying to live out a policy like that, you got Cuba. Cuba, by the way, over the weekend was removed from... Do I hear somebody clapping?
Hey, man, I'm clapping for my Cuba, man.
Oh, who? Juan Pablo, are you with us?
Yeah, man, I'm clapping for my Fidel Castro, man.
He's still alive and kicking, I gotta say. How's that communism working for you out there, Juan Pablo?
Oh, man, it couldn't be much better, man.
Well, I mean, I like antique cars, but that's all you have out there. Don't you have like a new Camry driving around anywhere in Cuba?
No, man, we like the good old American stuff from the 50s.
Yeah. You got a lot of that stuff. And you're no longer on the terrorism watch list or the terrorism state sponsor of terrorism.
No, man.
We told you, folks, President Obama, he had an epiphany in office, and this is for all Americans, but in particular those concerned about the social issues in our culture, when his daughters told him that gay marriage and gay stuff is in the norm, in the mainstream, and should have full acceptance between same-sex couples. His daughters, he was opposed to this coming into the election. He had an epiphany because his daughters enlightened him on that. And not only did we have changes culturally, but we had changes within the military. So our military has become a cauldron or a petri dish for social experimentation. And, we see how that's working out. We also recognize that President Obama grew up being a anti-colonialist, anti-neocolonialist. And what that simply means is that the colonizing countries, we'll use Great Britain in particular, countries like Great Britain, which use their enormous wealth through 1,000 years and through their enormous military capability, would travel around the world and find a place in Africa or India, whatever, and make it a British colony. Simply say, look, you people are slicing each other's throats off, you're throwing your babies on pyres of fire and pagan sacrifice, and we think we could help you by helping you with a language, helping you with productivity. And look at India today. People argue about the colonizing of India. India is one of the most phenomenal countries. It still has some serious caste problems, but in terms of taking the good stuff that the Brits left there and advancing, it's been a phenomenal success being colonized. Look at the United States of America. We were a colony of Britain. We were a bunch of ragtag people, and British sophistication came over from the UK, British law, all of that. And what typically happens with colonizers, often, not all the time, there's an abuse of the position that the colonizer is in. So that has to be addressed. But for President Obama to see the United States, which never was a colonizing nation, we never took places and made them our own and just raped their land and did all of this. In fact, we've always given back in the United States.
That's the job of the French.
Yeah, well, look, some of the European countries abused, no question. But for President Obama to study anti-colonialism under France Nyon and come out in his political theory to say the United States has to be calibrated down, its military's too strong, its economy's too strong. If you mitigate both of those, if you lessen both of those, then there'll be more world peace. See, this is the calculus for foreign policy that was so off base that it's proven in his short 6 years that he's been in office. He has transformed the military from the greatest fighting force by far to still barely the greatest fighting force. China is growing immensely and rapidly, as is Russia right now. And he has hindered seriously our warfighting capability, our capability to project strength throughout the globe through rules of engagement and through downsizing the military. The navies are downsized. And in this brutal, difficult world we live in, we have to have a very strong military presence. We have to be, in a sense, and this is another show, the world's policeman in order to keep ourselves safe here at home, keep North America safe, and keep our friends safe. Those things have to happen. But once he started redistributing the wealth of the United States from productivity into enterprise zones, into capitalistic ventures,
Green
and started
energy.
building a health network. Does anybody see Obamacare being any better than the system we had before Obamacare? But the vast sums of money being poured into this, which is hindering the economic growth of the country. Now, Josh Earnest and those will point to, oh, look, you know, the GDP's up a little bit here, or unemployment is down. These are all spun numbers, spun in the favor
It's
of
all lies.
It's complete
all lies.
lies.
First of all, the GDP came out last week for first quarter, and it was negative 0.7.
Well, that's not really
And
negative.
also, the unemployment rate might be down. The rate might have gone down, but the labor participation rate is the lowest it's ever been.
So more
there
people
are
are
more
employed.
people not working than ever in the history of this country, and about over 40% of the people are on food stamps.
You go anywhere now and you see we accept EBT, Electronics Benefit Transfer, I think the name of it is, EBT cards. You go to a liquor store, we accept EBT. You go anywhere, and this again is not an indication of a productive, successful culture or society, just the opposite. These are red flags that, hey, if we keep subsidizing bad behavior, guess what you get more of?
Bad behavior.
I happen to have been a direct participant in Contract with America, 1992, with Newt Gingrich's Contract with America. And I ran one of the congressional races. What was it? It was number 3, District 3 in California. A good friend of mine, Tim Lefevre, ran for the United States Congress. So I was one of his campaign advisors and managers. Contract with America, 1992.
Good thing you weren't his fundraising advisor.
No, I wasn't that. Speaking of fundraising, and we were in a big battle with the Clinton administration at that time. We wanted the Republican, we won. We had the new Congress in, all the freshmen that became stars like J.C. Watts and Steve, the wide receiver for the Seahawks, Steve
Largent.
Largent, yeah, all those guys. And a bunch of good guys came in that freshman class. We lost just by a few points to a 17-year Vic Fazio, incumbent Democrat leader. Almost knocked him off on $600,000 we ran a campaign on back then. But we had a big battle with the Clinton administration because we wanted to reform welfare. And the Republican viewpoint was very simple. We saw that there were a lot of men in the inner city who were totally physically capable of working, chose not to because they got a check. All right, they got a check from the government. So we said, I wonder what would happen if you cut that check off and these guys actually got to go find a job. And the Clinton administration was going, oh, there'll be people in the street and babies dying and all of this. And we fought it and pushed it through. And I was on the radio in those days pushing through the reform. The Republican Congress pushed through welfare reform. Huge success. Decreased the number of people on welfare, increased the number of people working, decreased the amount of money being spent by taxpayers on subsidies for bad behavior. That's what this comes down to. Certainly, there are unfortunate people that get caught up in situations that need taxpayer money to get through a difficult time in their lives. That's a good use. This is people with good behavior in a difficult set of circumstances. From a public policy perspective, you've got to make those analytical distinctions. Bad behavior, good behavior in difficult situations. And you have to say, we got to cut out the bad people. Well, the problem was for Democrats, and they still do this, if they subsidize bad behavior, guess who continues to vote for Democrats?
Those committing the bad behavior.
Sure. And then you have a downward spiral in the moral mentality, the cultural behavior of your citizenship in the United States, and you get Ferguson, and you get Baltimore. And just recently, an author, African-American black author, wrote and simply said, you want to know about Baltimore? You know, it wasn't over Freddie Gray or whatever who got shot. We're fed up with bad trash collection, with boarded up homes, with all of this horrible inner city lifestyle that exists because of a Republican mayor, Republican people.
Negatory, Tom.
Run by Democrats. We're fed up with the jungle we have to live in, and we're angry about it. Well, those are the consequences of a political philosophy that rewards bad behavior. So this president has failed in identifying how to properly fund people in difficult situations who have good behavior versus bad behavior, and it's all to maintain a political system called the Democrat Party. Very simple. That's internally. Now you take that, you start extrapolating on the use of federal tax dollars to fund some of these academic programs that are completely leftist, socialist, communist programs. And now we're training people to think like President Obama. This is the direction we're going in. That's why we need a cultural revolution at 23 minutes after 4 o'clock on June 1st. And we're going to bring you some of the elements in the next 2 hours, hour today, hour tomorrow. But I'm not going to change my shirt because we're shooting 2 hours in one day. We're going to play you the second hour tomorrow, June 2nd, Tuesday. That's what we're doing.
Before we go any further,
yes,
we have to make a little broadcast announcement. Not only are we on WSBR 740 in South Florida from North Miami to North Palm Beach, 740 on your AM dial, and also in Tampa on 1010 WHFS. But starting tonight at midnight tonight, the audio portion of our broadcast will be on Red State Talk Radio. So everyone check out Red State Talk Radio. And of course, you can always watch the show, which is the best way to do it. Go ahead and watch it on theunitedwest.org or Tea Party Community. Everyone needs to go to Tea Party Community. It's Facebook for Islamophobes. Got to go there, check it out, join. And after speaking with Tim yesterday, I know in about a month they're going to have a brand new website that's going to blow people away on its interactivity. So make sure to do that. And of course, we want everyone to stay informed, not just from this show, but read. Go on that box on your computer attached to a television monitor and go to jihadwatch.org every day. 10 stories a day. Go to frontpagemag.com. Go to Bare Naked Islam, The Religion of Peace. All this stuff is out there. You too can be almost as smart as Tom Trento if you were to read as much.
And if you don't have time for all of that, you must watch or listen to this show every day because we synthesize, we aggregate everything that's going on, and we put it into a cohesive, coherent statement, a big idea. And the big idea for today, one of them, is Islamophobia works. Islamophobia works. We're going to show you that by identifying over this week and next week what took place last weekend in Baltimore with the ICNA Mass, ICNA, Islamic Circle of North America, 40th anniversary conference in Baltimore. We had people undercover in there, and we've gathered a tremendous amount of intelligence. We're going to show you the deplorable state of the Muslim Brotherhood's organization, ICNA, in the United States of America. We're going to call out some of the leaders who are becoming comical caricatures of TV hucksters like Siraj Wahhaj. You're not going to believe what Siraj Wahhaj did last week. He jumped up on stage in a white sheet and ran around the stage basically begging for money in the most obtuse, obscene, ridiculous fashion, and the dopey people in the audience just kept pledging more and more and more money. I mean, he probably Al Sharpton was saying, how do I sign that guy up? And that's how crazy this stuff was. But we're also going to show you how the Muslim Brotherhood in the United States of America has decided, this is very, very dangerous, decided that the black community, the African American community in the United States, in the urban areas of America, need Islam. Did you hear what I said? One of the major objectives coming out of this 40th anniversary. Now, you don't know about this convention. It's supposed to have 20,000 people, only had 5,000 people. You may not have heard about it. You aren't aware of it. We're aware of it. We infiltrated it. We monitored it. We know what's going on. We're going to tell you how it's going to impact your life. In one way in particular, Islamic Muslim Brotherhood leaders have determined that where there is chaos, there's an opportunity. And this is the Saul Alinsky, President Obama methodology for community organizing, nothing new. But the Muslim Brotherhood believes that they can go into Baltimore, they can go into Detroit, they can go into South Central LA, they can go into the South Side of Chicago, and they could amp up their Islamic influence and bring peace and stability through the implementation of the Sharia on a local urban platform to change the area, but then bring soldiers on board for Allah, soldiers of Allah, to be part of the long-range goal of Islam, which is the Islamizing of the United States of America.
That picture tells a big story.
And what is that picture?
That is a picture of some of the ICNA leaders of the group of the conference you're speaking about, with none other than Congressman Keith Ellison. And that really just speaks volumes right there.
And Keith Ellison is right in the center there, from Minnesota, Muslim congressman who took his oath on a Quran. Interesting, folks. Interesting, very interesting. At the ICNA, Islamic Circle of North America, the ICNA conference, Memorial Day weekend, they touted the conference, the Muslim Brotherhood did, as a Memorial Day weekend event. That's the way they phrased it. Memorial Day, for all of you that may not be aware, is the last Monday in the month of May. It used to be the 30th, then it got shifted when we had this federal law that put these weekends together for 3-day weekends. It's the last Monday in May, and the Muslim Brotherhood touted Memorial Day weekend 40th convention as a pro-American event, bringing Islam to America, primarily to the inner cities. And not anywhere in their conference was there an American flag. Not anywhere was there the mention of Memorial Day. Not anywhere was there an identification in any way, shape, or form of a memorial to those soldiers who have given their all for the great principles of America. In fact, just the opposite. Coming out of people involved with ICNA, coming out of that event, were leaders of CARE, Zara Bilyeu out in San Francisco, who's the director of CARE out there, struggling with whether or not on Memorial Day as an American she can support the American war machine when they implement so many obscene and illegal wars and all of this nonsense. So we got the Brotherhood making moves on the black community in America, and the way they'll do that, the bridge from Muslim brothers like Nihad Awad terrorist who runs a terrorist organization out of Washington, D.C., identified by some foreign countries as a terrorist organization, and identified by our federal government, CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, as an organization helping fund Hamas in a terror trial. They're terrorists. They're cultural terrorists. They're not picking up weapons like Elton Simpson and Nadir Sufi did 4 weeks ago in a day when Damon, myself, 3 other United West guys, and 250 other people were in the Garland Convention Center, Curtis Culwell Convention Center, Garland, Texas, when 2 guys tried to kill all of us. They got no further than getting out of their car before the Garland PD shot them on the spot and killed them.
Well, let's not forget that an officer was shot.
Yeah, one guy was hit in the foot and was not hurt badly, thank God. But the terrorists we're talking about, Nihad Awad out of Washington, Hassan Shibli, head of CARE out of Tampa, these terrorists and others, they recognize, don't screw with Americans. You know, you can only push Americans so far. We witnessed some of that in Phoenix over the weekend. We're going to bring you that story in this 2-part special also. I'm going to tell you the pros and cons of the protest that was in front of the Islamic Cultural Center of Phoenix, where Elton Simpson and Nadir Sufi attended. And if you listen to the mainstream media, where they attended once or twice somewhere 150 years ago. That's how it's presented in the press. We're going to tell you about the pros and cons of that protest that took place. But in particular, Hassan Shibli, Hussam Alouche out of Los Angeles, the head of CARE in Los Angeles, Nihad Awad, these terrorists, these guys don't want to pick up weapons. These guys don't want to get their fingernails dirty. These guys put on their Armani suits, their Versace suits, their tailored suits. Whenever you see them, Hassan, he's the boy of the crowd. He's trying to be a Muslim man like Hussam Alouche in Los Angeles or Nihad Awad. These are sophisticated guys. They have their own tailors, their own specially made clothes. These guys know how to roll. Many of the Muslim Brotherhood leaders that I've seen roll in Rolls Royces. Hassan Shibli, he's the boy. He's trying to become a Muslim man and function at that level. He's got to change his wardrobe. What do you think, Damon? He needs to change his wardrobe a little bit?
Yeah,
look, he's got a tweed jacket on there.
Yeah, he's a little too close to college and not close enough to K Street.
Right. Nihad Awad would never be caught dead in a tweed suit like that or whatever.
No, I don't think so.
Look at it, it's got wrinkles on it and everything. He would never. Hassan
It's a cute
Alouche,
kufi hat, though.
Alouche, I think he's tailors on in Beverly Hills or something. But these guys are impeccably dressed. And that says a lot because these are Armani terrorists. These are guys that want to use the American system against itself to exploit the First Amendment, to exploit the Supreme Court, to exploit our own Western laws, ultimately to bring the Sharia in, so to use our democratic system to implement a totalitarian system.
Well, it's also much easier for them to peddle their garbage when you look Western, when you're wearing a nice suit and a tie. If you're to go around in rags and a kufi hat and a beard like Hassan Shibli, people are going to be a little bit leery.
Yeah, how come Hussam Alouche, the head of CARE in Los Angeles, and Nihad Awad don't look like him with untrimmed beard, trimmed by the mustache, just like the Islamic State, kufi hat? How come they're not doing that? I mean, what's going on with that?
First of all, Nihad is Palestinian, is he not?
Yes.
As we all know, the Palestinians are not the most religious of people. They're only religious when it comes to chasing Jews off of the Temple Mount. Okay, that's why ISIS is threatening to kill the heretic Hamas now. Okay, so Nihad is just really not that terribly religious in all likelihood. He's just a Jew-hating, Arab-loving guy. So he doesn't dress like that. But the primary reason that these guys dress like that is they're always on the Hill or they're at their state legislators, and they can't go in walking looking like Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, that's a significant part of this. The distinction between Islam, and this is a very big takeaway at 35 minutes after the hour, ladies and gentlemen, very big takeaway today. The complexity with managing a defense against Islam, the difficulty in grasping Islam and indicting it in a particular manner is magnified because Islam has two faces. There are two faces of Islam. And here in the West, the religious face is presented. It's a religion. It's a religion of peace. Bridges, building a bridge, an Abrahamic bridge from our Jewish brothers and our Christian brothers to our Islamic brothers, and we all kumbaya, love each other. This is the religious veneer that Nihad Awad and others present when they are either aggressively advancing or defensively standing for Islamic principles. Conversely, when you go into theater, when you go into the war zones, when you go where Muslims are slicing each other's throats and fighting, the political concept is the foundation. But you see the state component. You see the military component. You see Islam as a state. Now, this creates a big problem for those of us countering these guys because we're very aware of the doctrine of Islam, of the policies of Islam, of the tactics of Islam. The average legislator in Congress is not. The average elected congressman or woman, elected senator, man or woman, is not aware of the totality of the system of Islam. So when you don't understand the enemy, you can't critique or contain the enemy properly.
That's outside of Keith Ellison and Andre Carson, that is.
They understand it, and they're working the system from the inside. So when we, Tom Trento and our friends, the Gaffneys and the Horowitzes and Gellers and Spencers and Geert Wilders and Damons, and when we make a statement critiquing Islam as a state, the state element of Islam, which is part and parcel of Islam, then those not in the know have to respond by saying, you're Islamophobes. You fear Islam. When we're Islamo truth tellers is really what it is. But okay, that's the task for the communicators who are exposing. That's the job of the United West, to expose these competing ideologies that undermine American jurisprudence. And right now, communism, even Castro's communism, is not at the level of a threat index to men and women in America as is Islam. Even Soviet communism, their whole kind of homogenized communism now, even Chinese communism is not the immediate threat as Islamic doctrine is to Americans. Now, it's not to say we ought not be concerned about these other isms. We have to be. We've got to fight on a lot of fronts because America is the shining light. And for people who like to live in the dark, when you have a light shining in their eyes at 39 minutes after the hour, it doesn't feel well. So you got to put that light out. That's what we're going to do that's what our whole show is about. That's what our work is about. Yeah. But over the next 2 days, we're going to show you that Islam is a state. And the best way to do that is to show you a little video that was done. I think CNN did this. They went and took a look at how Islam functions as a state. Now, I've said this many times on this show, and we try to elevate the educational level of our viewers and listeners. So one way you can do that, friends, stop calling it ISIS. If we call ISIS ISIS, we're doing it to accommodate a particular need at a level of understanding, but we're trying to raise everybody up to the proper understanding. Originally, Al-Qaeda out of Iraq morphed into ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. It's an acronym, ISIS, Islamic State of Iraq, I, and Syria, S. Then, as it put its sights on a larger swath of land, it said, you know what? We read our scriptures, we read the Hadith, we read the Sunnah, we read our eschatology. We need to control the whole area where Lebanon is, where Jordan is, where Egypt is, where that other country Israel is. That's called the Levant, that stretch of land from North Africa going up the Mediterranean. And so they changed their name to, just like we changed our name from the Florida Security Council, to a name that was more indicative of our work, the United West, uniting the West against the Islamic Jihad. They changed their name about a year and a half ago to ISIL, Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Iraq is critical for a lot of reasons. Then, as they gained more and more territory, and they started having victories, phenomenal victories in Syria, in Iraq, they said, you know what? It's about time we declare a caliphate and a caliph, and we rock and roll. And they didn't just one day, they being the Islamic State, they didn't just one day say, hey, I'm the new leader of the gang here, let's rock and roll. No, 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 no. They had councils of Islamic scholars pouring through Islamic doctrine over 1,400 years, looking at the Salafist view, S-A-L-A-F-I-S-T, which is the doctrine of how the Prophet Muhammad lived himself. And their objective was very, very simple. If we follow the Prophet, if we follow Muhammad, how could we go wrong? If we do everything he did as a man, everything he did as a leader, everything he did as a military warrior, that's what life is about. So in following that, they said in order to declare a caliphate or caliphate, all we have to do is identify a leader, have a council approve the leader, and then implement state-like policies and start running a state. And last year, a group of people did that, and they identified Abu Bakr. And if you understand Islamic history, Abu Bakr was one of the great caliphs, one of the four caliphs, the first one that followed Muhammad after he died. So Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, coming out of Baghdad, Iraq, tying back to the Prophet, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was declared by the Council of Islamic Scholars the caliph of the Caliphate, the Islamic State. And look at how they run their operation today.
Sovereignty over the world's Muslim community. So, how does ISIS govern the territory it controls? Who picks up the garbage, runs schools, and patrols the traffic? Well, this is an area larger than many countries, and ISIS has divided the territory into wilayats, or provinces, each of which has a governor. Several new provinces have been created, virtually erasing the Syria-Iraq border. At the top of the government is Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the self-declared caliph of ISIS. He has a sort of cabinet, the Shura Council, and beneath that, about 10 ministries or councils that maintain everything from health, education, and religious rulings to transportation and even environmental policy. Despite its medieval sense of justice, in many ways, ISIS runs a surprisingly modern bureaucracy, according to terror analysts. The health department has fully operational hospitals, complete with maternity wards. Babies are delivered daily, registered, and issued with official ISIS birth certificates. It also runs a vaccination campaign with health workers on motorcycles delivering polio vaccine drops and shots to protect against measles, mumps, and rubella. It also has a court system that runs its strict interpretation of Sharia, or Islamic law. Theft, for example, is punishable by chopping off a hand, but it also handles everything from traffic violations to rental disputes. The education department runs several schools and even the university in Mosul. Girls receive an education, though segregated from boys, and the curriculum is severely limited. No art, music, or theater, no physical education or philosophy, just reading, writing, math, and of course, religion, according to ISIS. Any teacher hoping to work must undergo ISIS official Sharia training. In many places, ISIS has simply taken over the civil infrastructure already in place. Particularly in war-torn Syria, ISIS hopes to prove it is bringing order to chaos, however violent its rule.
Now, Damon, if you're a 20-year-old, disenfranchised Muslim kid, you're living in Jordan, you're living in London, and
you're living in Ohio.
You're living in Ohio, anywhere, and you've been following your religion, and you can't do anything. There's no joy, there's no peace, nothing, and you see that was put together, I think, by CNN. That little 2-minute piece. Now they got the name of the organization wrong, ISIS, when they call themselves the Islamic State, but we can't expect too much from CNN. But when you look at that, I look at that and I go, wow, these are not camel jockeys running around, just chopping people's heads off. These people are running a state that's larger, with more people, more territory than many states that are out there, and more functionally. They're taking chaos and creating order in it in a totalitarian manner, like Castro did and like all the totalitarian organizations do. But you got to look at that and say, I'd like to be a part of that. Now, this is CNN news analysis. Can you imagine when the Islamic State produces propaganda in Arabic, showing the same exact stuff, saying, look what we are doing? Then they root it in Islamic scripture, in the Quran, and then they root all of that in an eschatological end times doctrine, saying we are the answer to the world right now, how people will run to the Islamic State and join like crazy, and young women will too. That's exactly what's happening.
Exactly.
So, what are we going to do about it?
Well, I know what we didn't do about it a few weeks ago. What we didn't do was bombard that massive ISIS Islamic State brigade heading into Ramadi. It was only the same highway that we were able to annihilate Saddam Hussein's army with tanks and armed personnel carriers. But this administration chose not to decimate them when they had the opportunity to 2 weeks ago. I mean, if the video if every major network has video of these guys streaming into Ramadi single file down the highway, tell me how it's possible that our guys over there that are responsible for completing sorties and bombing them, that whopping on average 14 a day instead of 1,200 a day, clearly this administration has no desire to wipe out the Islamic State.
Now, in defense of President Obama, and in our conversations with many of our own friends who are military geniuses, who have, are high-level officers that are out now, this is a very complex situation. It isn't easy to figure out who our friends are in certain areas and who we're going to align ourselves with and what the ramifications are, whether we line up with Saudi Arabia or Iran or Syria or Assad or whatever. It's a mess. Well, it's a mess because of President Obama. And for all of you nitwits that want to root this back to President Bush, you're partially right, okay? We have maintained on this show that President Bush's first 4 years in office, he was fighting this battle properly. The last 4 years, he backed off a lot from where he should have. In particular, we never should have agreed to rebuilding Iraq and Afghanistan with Sharia-compliant constitutions. We should have just said, that's not going to happen. You want to have your religion here? Here's the point at which, if you want our help, if you want our blood and treasure and all of that, we are not endorsing a political system that has a religious foundation to it that we know for 1,400 years has caused nothing but death and destruction worldwide. So we're not participating if you do that, and we're going to maybe fight against you to do this. And in particular, never should have pulled out of Iraq when President Obama took over.
Certainly not without a status of forces agreement that every single military advisor said was necessary so that what is happening wouldn't have happened.
Of course, to have a massive military presence in Iraq would have mitigated a lot of this mess, because there were cops on duty. When there's no cops on duty, there's chaos. We pulled out of Iraq and left a neophyte group of 15-year-old Iraqis trying to fight the Baathists and the Sunni warriors that wanted to continue following Islamic doctrine and destroy. It would have been a much longer, more difficult war, but this is where we are. And now we're further pushed behind the momentum, and the momentum has been taken over by the Islamic State, and they're gaining more and more territory. Now it's very difficult to go in there and say, what should we do? But what Damon was referring to was all of these vehicles on the victory march after they took Ramadi. And you go, okay, there's like 5 miles of that. Why can't a cruise missile come in or anything and kill all these people? I mean, just have a massive destruction of it. Wasn't in the game plan. But here's what was in the game plan. When Ramadi fell, and when other cities in Iraq fell, 2,300, that's the magic number, 2,300 up-armored Humvees were captured by the Islamic State. American hardware. 2,300 small tanks, essentially. Armored personnel carriers, Humvees, even Abrams M1A1 tanks were captured. The booty, the military booty that the Islamic State has now. If you've been following the news over the weekend, the Islamic State has modified the IED military methodology that was very, very effective against our U.S. troops when we were fighting in Iraq. The roadside bombs, where they'd fuse together a couple of 100-millimeter shells and have a cell phone to ignite them, blow up a Humvee. The Islamic State has taken that to new levels. Here's what they're doing. They just killed 38 Iraqi cops today, yesterday, Sunday and Monday. They did that at 53 minutes after the hour. Tom Trento, your host on Enemies of the State. They did that by taking one of these very sophisticated up-armored Humvees, big, heavy vehicles, packing them full of TNT. You see where this is going? When you take a shell, an artillery shell, and you bury it underground and you explode it, the shrapnel from the metal goes up, the explosion causes death and destruction, as does the shrapnel. Imagine loading with thousands of pounds of TNT an up-armored Humvee that weighs about 7,000 pounds, and you load it with TNT, that becomes a rolling vehicle, a vehicle bomb, a VIED. Vehicle identified explosive device. And what they're doing right now, they are using the disguise of this being an Iraqi vehicle, the Islamic State is. They have an unlimited number of suicide volunteers who want to become mujahideen, want to become shihads, holy warriors giving their life in the jihad. And they're driving these things on the base of the Iraqi military, and the Iraqi military looks like it's one of theirs. Then they push the button, and the explosive capability of one of our U.S. Humvees loaded with 4,000 pounds of explosives is absolutely devastating, bigger than bombs we drop with our planes. And they're using these things tactically to devastate the mindset and the fighting will of the Iraqis. And they only have 2,300 of these to expend. And you're going to see more and more of this tactic that will result in the Islamic State gaining more and more and more territory. Now, one thing that did happen over the weekend, one good mark for the good guys. a buddy of ours, Damon, from Boston, wound up in paradise. You remember that?
Yes, I do.
If we can go to the PJ article, there he is, right there. Achmed Abu Samra, on the right on your screen, and a buddy of Tariq Mahenna. Tariq Mahenna is in jail right now for being involved in funding terrorism and terrorism plotting. But Achmed Abu Samra was killed over the weekend, and he was taken out in one of these special operations. I'm getting maybe somebody, okay. We can get Ilya on this for our next hour. We'll set Ilya up to come in and talk about Achmed Abu Samra. And he is an American, basically, went to school up in Stoughton, Massachusetts, right outside of Rabbi John Hausman's synagogue.
Where I'll be next week.
You're going to be up there, and Rabbi Hausman has a tremendous event, Freedom Isn't Free, headlined by Admiral Ace Lyons, and with him is Claire Lopez and Frank Gaffney, Center for Security Policy. They're going to be talking about the jihad coming to America, what we can do to fight it. But when we were up there last year, we went around the corner, literally around walking distance, around the corner from Rabbi John Hausman's synagogue in Stoughton, Massachusetts, 20 miles outside of Boston. We went to the high school where Achmed Abu Samra went to school, and we actually shot some video right in front of the high school sign. And who is this guy? Well, remember, how could you forget the highly produced videos coming out of the Islamic State of the various beheadings with Jihad John, the English beheader, and all the staged approach, the staged decapitations of the various Christians, or whether or not they were captured soldiers, culminating with setting the Jordanian pilot on fire in a cage. Those were produced by the media genius Achmed Abu Samra, who is an American citizen living in the Boston area, then went over to fight and work with the Islamic State. Well, over the weekend, here's what happened. The Iraqi Ministry of Interior announced the death of dozens of ISIS terrorists. This is Pajamas Media, they're still using the word ISIS terrorists. In an airstrike in the West Anbar province, we're familiar with that. Al Arabiya, the television network, reported this on Sunday. Among those killed was Abu Muhammad al-Suri, also known as Abi Samra, who is reportedly an expert in filmmaking, and ISIS documentary filmmaker Abu Osama al-Amariki. And in a statement obtained by Al Arabiya News, the Iraqi Minister of Interior announced the elimination of various ISIS commanders and various nationalities in an airstrike that targeted their compound in the city Qayyam, the jurisdiction of Fallujah. Remember Fallujah? Sure. And the statement added, among those killed in Syria was Achmed Abu Samra. And we will have one of the experts in Boston, Ilya, who works with Americans for Peace and Tolerance with Charles Jacobs, on our show tomorrow. They have done extensive research into the jihad in Boston, into the Boston bomber situation. And we'll have Ilya on. Don't miss that show tomorrow. Today's Monday, June 1st. Tomorrow, the 2nd. Ilya will be on to go through this story, tell us what's going on. Then we'll draw applications to connect this to the Garland attack that we were under attack a month ago and a day. And we'll make the connection to the Phoenix protest at the Islamic Cultural Center of Phoenix. Protest that was there, put on by some motorcycle folks. We're going to tie all of this together so that all these confusing bits and pieces help you understand how horribly President Obama is failing as the commander-in-chief, how he's putting more and more of our military at risk because of the rules of engagement, how we're failing in negotiations to Iran, which is going to be devastating at the end of this month, the 30th, and how somebody, good Americans have to rise up and correct culturally, educationally, and through street activism, legally and professionally, correct some of the failures of this administration. That's where we're going. On Wednesday, we have Billy Vaughn back in studio. We're continuing with our deep investigation into the United States cover-up of the shoot-down of Extortion 17. For now, we're going to say goodbye. Ilya tomorrow on Islamic Jihad in Boston, Florida, and Texas. And then Wednesday, Billy Vaughn, Extortion 17. See you, everybody.